Apna Course. Get smart, get ahead.
The next domain which we talk about is information system management practices. So again, when we look at COBIT 5 enterprise enablers, we are looking at what is called as, again to reiterate, principle, policies and frameworks. Then we talk about processes. Then we talk about organizational structures. Even for the sake of repetition, I have put these slides again and again, so that it goes into your, gets drilled down into your head. 4 is culture, ethics, behavior. 5 is information. 6 is services, infrastructure and applications. Then you have got people, skills and competencies. So when we talk about resources, what is it that we talk about resources? The first thing which it talks about resources, as I said earlier also, 5 plus 6 plus 7 put together is called as resources. So when in this context of this chapter, when it's talking about resources, COBIT resources are people, information and service infrastructure and applications. ISO 27000 standard also has dealt with people aspect of business and is a key resource. In your CISA review manual, when we are talking about resources, in this specific chapter on governance, we are talking more of the people side of business. So it talks about human resources. One section of your CISA review manual talks about human resources management. It is not structured the way it should have been structured. If you ask me, ISO 27001, which is a better standard, has structured the HR aspects into 3 as pre-employment controls, post-employment controls, and then you have got what is called as the post-employment, we have got the pre-employment controls, we have got during employment controls, and then we have got post-employment controls. So what is a pre-employment controls? Yeah, I would urge you to go through the various SOA, statement of applicability. Ability as per the ISO 27001 framework, which has got around 133 controls, around 9 controls on HR, which is very important, and I want each CISA aspirant to know these 9 controls. The first one it talks about is pre-employment controls. Before you recruit an employee, you need to know his background. So there is something called pre-employment controls. Be in the process of hiring, the interview process, etc., you need to have a lot of pre-employment controls. Now, one of the 2 aspects from an Indian context I would like to tell you is when you are doing a pre-employment control, you need to look at their certificates, experience, etc. So now there is a common site called National Skills Registry. So if TCS or Tata or Infosys or Cognizant is going to recruit you, all your credentials will be verified by TCS logging into the NSR. It is also called the NSR in that registry, and identify all your certificates, etc. It will not ask each employee to bring and produce his qualifications, etc. So NSR is going to be a repository from where many of the organizations in future is going to do this pre-employment verification. In addition to this, for senior management, there are a lot of detective agencies which have been employed to identify the integrity of the individual concerned. So pre-employment checks are going to be very important, whatever in the days to come. Once an employee enters an organization, the controls cannot be lost. So therefore we have got what is called as during employment controls. Once the employee comes in and joins, he will be given an employee handbook which will talk about do's and don'ts. It will also have promotion policies. It will talk about training. It will talk about scheduling and time reporting. It will talk about employee performance evaluation. It will talk about required vacations. Required vacations is a very important aspect as far as fraud control is concerned. If one analyzes the history of frauds, most frauds have taken place where the individual has not gone on leave for years together. This itself is a red flag item as far as employment controls during employment are concerned. Another important aspect is, which is missing in this slide, is information security awareness. In most companies where a new recruitee joins, he undergoes an induction program. As a part of the induction program, he is imparted information security awareness. And there is also, in some good companies like MNCs, they take a undertaking or a signature from each employee year on year stating that he has read and understood the entire terms and conditions of his employment. The next point is termination policies, which is also can be treated either as part of during employment or post employment. As a part of termination, what are the things if an employee is terminated, what assets he has to give it back, what is the process of disciplinary action to be taken, what is the process of appeal, everything comes in that. The next is, once there is post employment, the user IDs of the employee user IDs should be disabled immediately. This is one of the key requirements of post employment controls of ISO 27001. So this aspect can be tested in your CISA in terms of these three. The next important aspect which we are going to discuss is sourcing practices. So sourcing practices relate to the way an organization obtains the IS function required to support the business. As all of us are aware, an organization can use the in-house resources for sourcing. They can use the outsourced resources, or the model can be hybrid, which is in plus out. It can be IS functions. Now we talk about the world. Now we are talking about a global village. I do not remember who has coined this word called global village. The world is such a small place, it is highly interconnected. Those who are interested in reading, you can read an interesting book on how it is. The world is flat by Thomas Friedman. So he talks that the entire world is flat. So from one end to another end, it does not make a difference. So the IS function can be done on site, it can be done off site, it can be done offshore. There is no harm in that. So the different types of models are now emerging as far as the IS functions are concerned. So in-house, outsource, or hybrid, on-site, off-site, offshore. Now, how do we take a decision on whether to insource or outsource? The first question which many organizations ask is this function a core function? The basic decision making criteria of outsourcing is that anything that is non-core can be outsourced. A word of caution here, as certain regulators across the globe have clearly come out and put it in black and white in terms of regulations telling that core activity cannot be outsourced. To give an example, in the Indian context, there is a regulator called the IRDA, which is the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority, which has given a diktat almost 2 years back stating that no insurance company can outsource their core activity. And they also went on explaining in the same circular, telling what is core and what is non-core. Otherwise, each insurance company can come and tell this is core for me, another insurance company can tell the other one is non-core. The same activity from two insurance companies will be, one will look at it as core, the other will look at it as non-core. So one of the most important aspects of outsourcing is only non-core activities can be outsourced. Once that is done, then are there internal competencies to undertake this task? For the conducting of this is a specialized knowledge required. A simple example will be network audit or a penetration testing, VAPT of a network. It is very specialized. Is there experience within the organization? There may be competencies, but they may not be experience. So competencies is different, experience is different. So these are the four inputs based on which an organization can take a decision whether to outsource or not to outsource. Now, what are the reasons for outsourcing? This could be a good question for examination, probable question. A desire to focus on core activities, which we already seen. Pressure on profit margins. There is also one more aspect which is not mentioned here in typically software outsourcing is the head count. It has been observed in many software development companies of banks. They have X percentage of employees who are on their roles and Y percent of that X percent of employees are not on the roll, which gives them two things. One is flexibility based on the project, and second is not to show the number of head counts on their balance sheet or for reporting purposes. The another reason for outsourcing is the pressure on profit margins. Increasing competition that demands cost savings. So they need to look at as a cost savings. Now flexibility with respect to both organization and structure. Now when you talk about cost savings, we also talk about a lot of outsourcing destinations now. People would have seen India, China, and Philippines. The biggest threat to India now is Philippines, where the outsourcing activity is going on increasing day by day. China, the problem is with the language. India and Philippines have that English advantage language with the Chinese is yet to get pick up. But days are not far when we can see Chinese people also picking up English. That will also be another threat. So one of the other reasons of having outsourcing is the flexibility with respect to both organization and structure. One of the important things one need to understand as a CISA auditor is outsourcing is a strategic decision and is not only a cost decision, as it has significant control implications for management. There are control implications when you outsource. As we go ahead, we'll see what it means. So from a CISA perspective, please keep it at the back of the head. Outsourcing is a strategic decision, not only a cost decision. Now outsourcing contracts. The moment one starts to outsource, what are the things which we need to understand? As a part of a CISA assignment of IS audit, if the scope shows that some process or some activity is outsourced, typically we would have seen the specialized areas in India is NOC and SOC. NOC stands for network, SOC stands for securities. Operation Center. Most banks, be it public sector or private sector, have outsourced this activity of NOC and SOC to specialized agencies. for the simple reason they neither have the wherewithal in terms of cost as well as the knowledge. Another important reason why this has been outsourced is because technology keeps becoming obsolete by the hour. So if it is outsourced to knock and sock, these people handle not only one customer, they handle many customers. So they will be technologically more upgraded and more knowledgeable on a day-to-day basis is one of the main reasons why this too has been outsourced. So once if you are asked to do an audit of a knock or sock, the first and foremost starting point will be the outsourcing contract. So outsourcing contract becomes the most critical document for review. Most outsourcing contracts need to have clauses like the right to audit, which is very elementary. The necessary confidentiality clauses needs to be incorporated in that. Fidelity insurance, which we already discussed earlier, for frauds by employees. Then clearly defined dispute escalation and resolution, network controls, logical access controls, business continuity planning, and service level agreements. As CISA auditors, whenever you come across, you may also come across what is called as OLA or operating level agreements. All of you need to know the difference between OLA. OLA is there as per ISO 20000. OLA is for intra-organization, that means within the organization between two departments. An OLA operates between two departments within an organization, while a service level agreement operates outside the organization, customer and vendor. Also, to share my experiences of last 10 years with this SLA, there are three aspects of SLA. One is drafting the SLA, one is monitoring the SLA, and third is corrective action on SLAs. Most agreements have very nicely and beautifully worded SLAs. As an audit point, we take that SLAs and ask our customers, show me the reports of SLAs. They produce simple Excel sheets which has all these parameters. One of the most biggest drawbacks which we have observed is the monitoring of SLAs. How they are monitored, what reports go to the management of the person who is outsourcing, all that is very rarely seen. SLA is only restricted to the principal agreement, nothing beyond that. Now, what are the advantages related to outsourcing? This could also be a question. The possible advantages related could be commercial outsourcing companies can achieve economies of scale, as we said, through deployment of reusable component software. Outsourcing vendors are likely to be able to devote more time and to focus more effectively and efficiently, as we already seen it, effectively as well as efficiently on a given project than an in-house staff. Outsourcing vendors are likely to have more experience with a wider array of problems, issues and techniques than in-house staff. What are the other advantages? The act of developing specifications and contractual agreements using outsourcing services is likely to result in better specifications than if developed by in-house staff. Vendors are highly sensitive to time consuming diversions and changes. Feature creep or scope creep is substantially less likely with outsourcing vendors. Also a very good feature. If you are developing some software in-house and you are developing a software from an external vendor, we have practically seen in 2-3 instances of audits, an external developed software has got very little change request, whereas in-house software has got innumerous change requests, for the simple reason that in-house means it is our own and outsource means you have to pay, which is a myth again if you ask me. Now the disadvantages. So as I said, on outsourcing you can get 1 or 2 questions on outsourcing. Costs exceeding customer expectations can be, if you do not scope your activity properly, there is a possibility that your costs can exceed your customer expectation. Loss of internal IS experience, that experience which you would have got by you yourself executing the IS project, you will lose it. Loss of control over information systems, the entire systems is not at your disposal. Vendor failure of a vendor going FUD or the vendor going bankrupt is also another related to outsourcing. So at this juncture I would like to introduce you one more concept of vendor failure, how it can be handled. There can be a question for your CISA. Typically the case is there is a possibility of a software, a bank which has purchased a software from a firm A, and the bank has analyzed and identified the risk as this software developer being a very small software developer. What happens to the source code if this software developer runs away? So that is vendor failure. That is a risk for outsourcing. This risk can be controlled by what is called as a software escrow. I do not know whether this has been discussed across any of the modules so far. Even if it has been discussed, for the benefit you should know what is a software escrow. A software escrow is an account where the software developer deposits his software code to a third party for a payment of annual fees, and that it is the job of this third party who holds the entire source code in an escrow account, and if the software vendor goes bankrupt or beyond repair or whatever it is, based on certain terms and conditions of the escrow agreement, the escrow provider will pass on the source code to the bank. So a typical escrow agreement will be between 3 parties: the bank, the software vendor and the escrow provider. So this is one way of managing the risk of an business risk related to outsourcing. Then limited product access can also be a impediment for your, or a disadvantage. Difficulty in reversing or changing outsourced agreements. So one of the most important aspects which we need to address of reversing or changing an outsourcing agreement is the exit clause. We have seen a lot of things in the earlier slides. One of the most important clauses in the agreement is also, is there an exit clause? Then deficient compliance with regulatory and legal requirements by the service provider. In many a times when you see the something is outsourced to a company X, the company X may not even have the requisite software licenses, or they may use illegible software, they may not even have simple labor law compliances. So compliances can be multiple. I know of a company which was an outsourcing company with 80 to 100 people, which were using illegal operating systems. Illegal operating systems for their 80 or 90 desktops, and one fine morning they had to shut shop. Contract terms not being met is also another disadvantage. Lack of loyalty of contract personnel towards the customer can be another disadvantage. And also too big. The company to whom we have outsourced the item or the activity could be too big also can be a disadvantage, because for the terms of revenue you may be a very small bank which has outsourced to too big a company.
Apna Course. Get smart, get ahead.